The story of the Wild Bunch begins at a time when the American West was changing faster than anyone expected. Railroads stretched across the land. Barbed wire divided open plains. New banks and new laws pushed the frontier closer to modern life. Many old cowboys felt the world they knew slipping away, replaced by businessmen, telegraphs, and strict rules. But in the middle of this new world, a group of riders refused to fade quietly into history. They were bold, they were clever, they were dangerous, and they would soon become the most feared outlaw gang of the last frontier. People across the country would come to know their name, the Wild Bunch. Their story starts long before their famous robberies. It starts with the background of the two men who shaped the gang from the ground up. Two men who seemed completely different, yet somehow fit together perfectly. Two men who would become legends. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Butch Cassidy was born as Robert Leroy Parker, the son of poor Mormon farmers in Utah Territory. From a young age, he felt the weight of poverty. He worked hard, helped his family, and tried to stay honest. But the West was a harsh place, and small mistakes turned into big lessons. One day, when he was still just a boy, he rode into town looking for work. He needed new clothes and hoped to earn a few dollars. The store was closed when he arrived, but the door was unlocked. He walked in, looked at a pair of jeans he wished he could afford, and took them. It was a small act, not meant to harm anyone, but it changed everything. When the store owner later confronted him, the man did not punish him. Instead, he forgave him. He told young Robert that the world was hard enough without people hurting each other. Robert never forgot that moment. It taught him that kindness existed, but it also taught him something else. Honest work did not protect people from struggle. He spent the next few years moving from ranch to ranch, doing labor for low pay. He met cowboys, gamblers, and wanderers. One of them was Mike Cassidy, a horse thief with charm, humor, and a dangerous life. Robert admired him, and soon people started calling him by a new name, Butch Cassidy. While Butch grew into the role of a clever outlaw, another young man was traveling a different path. His name was Harry Longabaugh, a quiet and serious boy from Pennsylvania. Harry rode west, searching for adventure and opportunity. Instead, he found trouble. He was arrested in the small town of Sundance, Wyoming, for stealing a horse. The jailers gave him a nickname he never escaped: the Sundance Kid. Sundance was not known for loud behavior. He did not joke much. He did not argue. But everyone who met him noticed something else. He was incredibly skilled with a gun. His aim was perfect. His hands were fast. He stayed calm, even in danger. These qualities made him a natural gunman, though he never boasted about it. His quiet nature only added to his mysterious presence. Years later, when Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid finally met, they recognized something in each other. Butch was the planner, the man who studied maps, counted money, and thought ahead. Sundance was the action, the sharpshooter, the rider who stayed cool under pressure. Together, they became something powerful, something unstoppable. But Butch and Sundance did not plan to create a gang at first. Life pushed them toward it. The West was no longer friendly to wandering cowboys. Powerful railroad companies took land from ranchers. Cattle barons forced small businesses to close. Many honest workers were left with nothing. Some drifted into outlaw life not because they wanted to hurt people, but because they felt the world had turned against them. Butch, who hated violence, decided that if he was going to break the law, he would do it with rules. He believed in loyalty. He believed in fairness. And he believed that killing was unnecessary when planning was smart. These ideas attracted other outlaws. Soon, riders with different strengths joined them. Brave men, reckless men, angry men, and desperate men. One of the most important early members was Elsie Lay, Butch's close friend. Elsie was tough, dependable, and ready to follow Butch's lead. Then there was Kid Curry, a fast and deadly gunman with a wild temper. Others came and went. Men like Will Carver, Ben Kilpatrick, and Harvey Logan. Each brought a different skill, and each believed that Butch Cassidy could lead them to fortune. Butch studied the weaknesses of banks and trains. He studied how the new rail lines worked. He watched how guards moved. He mapped escape routes through canyons and mountains. When he spoke, the men listened. They trusted him. They followed him. And soon, they became more than just a group of outlaws. They became the Wild Bunch, a gang known not only for their crimes, but for their discipline, their teamwork, and their boldness. This was the moment the legend began, a moment when outlaws stood proudly against the changing world, a moment when the last shadow of the Wild West refused to disappear, and the world was about to notice them. As the 1890s unfolded across the American West, Butch Cassidy's small crew slowly transformed into something bigger, stronger, and far more organized than anyone expected. The open land was shrinking. Railroads controlled the valleys. Banks tightened security. Lawmen trained harder. Yet somehow, Butch's men survived. Not only survived, they grew. What made the group so special was not only their skill, it was their bond. The outlaws around Butch Cassidy were not just criminals riding together. They were becoming a real brotherhood, a family shaped not by blood, but by shared danger, shared struggle, and a shared sense that the world had left them behind. Butch Cassidy influenced them more than anyone. He had a strange power. He made men feel safe, even in a life filled with danger. His easy smile, calm voice, and clever planning earned him trust. He showed respect to his riders, and they returned it. Many outlaws drifted toward him hoping for a chance at wealth, but they stayed because Butch treated them better than most bosses ever had. One of the first to truly bond with Butch was Elsie Lay. Elsie was strong, serious, and loyal to the core. He had a rough upbringing and never trusted many people, but Butch won him over quickly. When the two rode together, they moved like a pair of wolves, always alert, always ready, always watching each other's backs. They dreamed of a better life after the outlaw years, maybe land of their own, or a small business where no one judged them. But deep down, both men understood the truth. The outlaw road rarely ended in peace. Still, they held on to that hope. It kept them human. Then came the man who changed the whole balance of the group, Kid Curry. Born Harvey Logan, tall, wiry, angry, and impossible to predict. Kid Curry was the opposite of Butch Cassidy in nearly every way. Where Butch was calm, Curry was hot. Where Butch smiled easily, Curry narrowed his eyes. Where Butch planned, Curry fired his gun. Kid Curry came from a family of broken dreams. His brothers had turned to crime. The law hunted them, and tragedy followed him like a shadow. Many men feared him, and for good reason. He was said to be one of the fastest and deadliest shooters in the West. But even Kid Curry respected Butch Cassidy. He once admitted, "Butch is the only man who can make me think before I pull the trigger." And that meant something. With Curry's arrival, the group gained both strength and danger. Curry kept enemies away, but he also attracted trouble. Wherever he went, lawmen watched closely. The Wild Bunch grew stronger, yet the risks doubled. More riders joined over time. Ben Kilpatrick, the tall Texan, known for his size and courage. Will Carver, confident and reckless, but dependable in a fight. Harvey Logan's brothers, though some came and went quickly. And of course, the mysterious sharpshooter, Sundance Kid, who remained quiet but always deadly when needed. Sundance didn't talk much around the campfire. He preferred to sit with his hat low, listening to Butch and Elsie talk about plans or memories. But whenever trouble approached, Sundance was ready before anyone else. His calmness settled the group. When he spoke, which was rare, the men paid attention. What kept the Wild Bunch together was Butch's surprising rule. He did not want anyone to kill unless it was absolutely necessary. This rule was strange for outlaws. Many gangs shot first and asked questions later. Butch did the opposite. He believed that human life mattered, even in the world of criminals. He believed every shooting brought more lawmen, more Pinkertons, more heat, and he believed that clever planning could replace violence. Some outlaws laughed at his ideas at first, but after they saw how smoothly his plans worked, they stopped laughing. Butch's mind was sharp. He knew train timetables, guard routines, bank weaknesses, secret hideouts, and saved trails across the mountains. He also introduced something new to outlaw life-teamwork. Most criminals acted alone or in small pairs, but Butch designed robberies that needed multiple men working together perfectly, like a puzzle. He trusted his riders, and they trusted him. Soon, the Wild Bunch became a real unit, practiced and polished. When they rode out, The sound of hooves felt like thunder. They spent nights in hidden canyons, like Hole in the Wall in Wyoming or Robbers Roost in Utah. These places were natural fortresses, narrow entrances, high cliffs, deep shadows, where no lawman dared follow. The Wild Bunch stored food, ammunition, and extra horses in these hideouts. They played cards, fixed the saddles, told stories, and slept under the stars. For some, this rough outlaw life felt more like home than anywhere they had ever lived. The gang also created a system most people didn't know, bowed away to disappear after a robbery. They prepared fresh horses, sometimes 5 or 6 each, hidden along the escape route. After a robbery, they switched horses at full speed, outsmarting trackers. Their trails became impossible to follow. Butch Cassidy built a gang that could challenge banks, trains, and entire posses of lawmen, and word of their success spread across the West. Ordinary people whispered their names around campfires. Newspapers printed shocking stories. Lawmen grew nervous. Some admired them secretly. Some feared them deeply. But everyone recognized what was happening. A new kind of outlaw gang was rising. A gang smarter than the old criminals. More organized, more daring. A gang led by men who refused to vanish quietly into history. This was the early spark of the Wild Bunch legend, the beginning of a storm that would soon shake the entire nation. As the Wild Bunch grew stronger, the American West continued to tighten around them. New towns formed. More sheriffs were hired. Railroad companies joined forces with armed guards. And the Pinkerton Agency, the most feared detective force in the country, watched every trail closely. But the Wild Bunch did not slow down. They were just getting started. What separated them from every other outlaw group was simple: their planning. Most outlaws acted wild, unprepared, and impulsive. They robbed banks in anger. They attacked trains without studying them. They trusted luck more than skill. And because of that, most ended up dead sooner than later. But Butch Cassidy was different. He treated outlaw life like a science. Every detail mattered. Every escape path was chosen carefully. He believed that a smart outlaw could survive longer than a violent one, and he wanted his gang to live, not die. Butch spent hours studying maps, scouting trails, and watching railroad patterns. He traveled disguised as a ranch hand or a salesman. He befriended strangers to learn who guarded what. He walked through towns weeks before a robbery, counting footsteps between bank doors and back alleys. He even bought newspapers from different regions to check train schedules. Sometimes the other gang members made jokes about how much time he spent planning, but every time a job went perfectly, their respect for him grew. The first big test of Butch's planning came when he decided to strike a train carrying a large sum of railroad money. The target was the Union Pacific Overland Flyer, one of the most important trains crossing the West. The gang wanted the money, but they also wanted to send a message. The Wild Bunch was here, and they were smarter than anyone expected. Before the robbery, Butch met with the gang in a quiet valley near their hideout. The air was cold. Their horses snorted and stomped as the men circled around a small fire. Butch unrolled a map and pointed to each part of the plan. He spoke calmly, like a teacher explaining a lesson. "We stop the train here, Sundance, and we'll take the express car. Ben and Elsie cover the rear. Curry stays hidden until needed." Then he told them exactly how long it would take, when to use dynamite, where the guards would run, and where they would switch horses after the escape. The men listened closely. No one interrupted. No one doubted him. Not even Kid Curry, who normally questioned everything. When dawn came on the day of the robbery, the Wild Bunch rode out with confidence. They reached the tracks before sunrise and positioned themselves in the shadows. The whistle of the approaching train echoed through the valley like a warning bell. Steam hissed. Metal wheels rattled. Then came the moment Butch had prepared for. The gang signaled, and Sundance stepped onto the tracks, waving a lantern. The engineer pulled the brakes. The train slowed, then stopped. Everything happened fast. Sundance and Will climbed into the express car. Elsie and Ben secured the passengers. Kid Curry kept watch from a nearby ridge with his rifle ready. Butch oversaw everything calmly. He moved from man to man, making sure no one panicked. No one made mistakes. When the safe inside the express car refused to open, the gang used dynamite. They placed too much, and the explosion was loud enough to shake the ground. Pieces of wood flew everywhere, and the safe's contents scattered across the car. But the blast also did something else, shattered the silence of the West. From that moment, everyone knew the Wild Bunch was no ordinary gang. They grabbed the money, mounted their horses, and followed Butch's escape plan. Every few miles, they switched horses. They crossed rocky streams to break their tracks. They disappeared into narrow canyons where no posse could follow. By the time lawmen arrived at the robbery site, the Wild Bunch was already miles away, riding toward their hidden hideout, laughing and joking around the campfire. But behind the laughter, Butch saw something more serious. The Pinkertons would not ignore this. Their success made them famous, but it also made them targets. Newspapers called them the train robbers of the new century. Some citizens admired their skill, others feared them deeply. But one thing was clear: the railroad companies wanted revenge, and they needed professionals to capture them. This meant only one thing: more planning, more hiding, and more challenges. Still, the gang didn't feel fear. They felt powerful. They felt unstoppable. Every man in the group trusted the others. They shared food, stories, and dreams around the fire. For some, this was the closest they had ever been to a real family. Butch watched them with mixed emotions. He cared for his men. He wanted them to succeed. But he also knew that outlaw life had a natural ending, and it was rarely peaceful. He wondered how long they could keep outrunning the world. Sundance, who often stayed quiet, understood this too. He could read Butch's thoughts with a single glance. One night he told him softly, "We'll go as far as we can. After that, we'll deal with whatever comes." Butch nodded slowly. That was all they could do. As weeks passed, the Wild Bunch continued practicing their teamwork. They learned to ride faster, shoot straighter, and rely on each other more deeply. They moved through the plains like shadows, slipping in and out of towns with perfect timing. Every rider had a role. Every job had a plan. Every escape had a backup route. The gang was becoming a perfect machine, and the frontier wasn't ready for them. People whispered their names with awe. Lawmen spoke of them with frustration. Railroad companies cursed them with anger. But for Butch Cassidy, it was only the beginning. The Wild Bunch had proven what they could do. Now they needed a bigger challenge. A job so daring, so unforgettable, that it would make their legend unshakable. And that job was coming soon. As the Wild Bunch carried out one successful job after another, their reputation grew louder across the American West. Newspapers printed dramatic stories. Travelers whispered their names beside campfires. Some called them heroes. Others called them devils. But all agreed on one thing: this gang was unlike any other in frontier history. But to truly understand why the Wild Bunch became so powerful, one must look deeper beyond the robbery, beyond the shootouts, beyond the tension with the law. The real strength of the Wild Bunch came from something rare: their bond, inside their hidden camps. Far from towns and lawmen, the gang lived like a strange kind of family. They ate together, joked together, argued together, and trusted each other with their lives. For men who had grown up with loss, poverty, and violence, this sense of belonging was something they had never known before. Butch Cassidy, their leader, treated the men with respect. He never shouted orders. He explained plans calmly, listened to suggestions, and always shared the loot fairly. Even in a world of outlaws, where greed often tore gangs apart, Butch believed in fairness. He believed that loyalty was worth more than gold. Because of this, the others followed him willingly. They didn't fear him. They trusted him. Sundance Kid, quiet and watchful, became the gang's steady anchor. He wasn't talkative, but when someone felt unsure or afraid, he was the one who sat beside them. His calmness made the others feel safe. And when danger came, his deadly aim made sure no one in the gang fell easily. Then there was Kid Curry, the wild heart of the bunch. His temper was famous. His aim was terrifying. But to the gang, he was more than a gunslinger. He was a brother who protected them fiercely. He laughed loudly, fought passionately, and carried deep wounds from a childhood filled with loss. When Curry rode with the gang, he felt alive, and for once, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Ben Kilpatrick, known as the Tall Texan, used his strength to help with heavy gear and dynamite. Will Carver was brave and quick, always ready to back up Sundance. Harvey Logan, Curry's brother, had a sharp mind for travel routes and horse changes. Elsie Lay, Butch's closest friend, watched over the supplies and made sure the camp stayed safe. Each man provided something the others didn't have. Together, they became a complete circle. During quiet evenings, in their hidden hideouts, places like Robber's Roost, Hole in the Wall, and the maze-like canyons of Utah, the men relaxed around the fire. They shared stories from their childhoods, tales of old loves, and dreams of a life beyond the outlaw trail. Some dreamed of ranches. Some dreamed of small cabins by rivers. Some dreamed of disappearing to South America, where lawmen couldn't follow. But for many, these dreams were only whispers. Outlaw life rarely ended peacefully, and every man around the fire knew it. Still, they dreamed anyway. The hideouts themselves became symbols of freedom. They were almost impossible for lawmen to reach. Only narrow trails led into the canyons. The gang used the land's natural defenses to their advantage. They placed lookouts at high points, always watching for dust clouds that meant riders were approaching. Inside these safe zones, time seemed to slow down. The men played cards. They cleaned their guns. They practiced shooting at bottles and laying ambush traps. Sundance often spent hours sharpening his skills, hitting small targets from far distances with calm ease. Kid Curry, on the other hand, used training to release his wild energy. He practiced quick draws over and over, the sound of his revolver clicking echoing through the canyon walls. Butch Cassidy liked to walk along the ridges at sunset, imagining what the future could look like. He wondered how long the gang could keep riding, how long they could keep outsmarting the law. He wanted them to live long enough to escape the outlaw world forever. But deep inside, he knew time was running out. One evening, as the firelight danced across the canyon walls, Sundance turned to Butch. "You think this can last?" he asked quietly. Butch paused before answering. "Not forever," he said. "But we're not done yet. Not even close." And he was right. While the gang felt safe in their hideouts, the world outside was preparing for a storm. The railroad companies were furious. They hired more guards, added metal reinforcements to train safes, and demanded help from the Pinkertons. Wanted posters appeared in every town, showing grainy photos of the wild bunch riders. Rewards grew higher. Lawmen formed larger posses. For the first time, the gang began to feel the pressure closing in around them. Still, in the shadows of their hideouts, they felt untouchable. To the public, the wild bunch became a kind of legend. Some admired their style-fast horses, clean escapes, no unnecessary killing. Some feared their skill and boldness. Some simply wanted the excitement their stories brought to quiet frontier towns. But for the gang themselves, life was much simpler. They woke up each day, fed their horses, cleaned their weapons, and prepared for whatever came next. They were living on borrowed time, and they knew it. Yet they chose to enjoy every moment, every laugh, every shared meal, every ride through open plains. These peaceful times formed the heart of who they were. They weren't just criminals. They were men shaped by a harsh world, trying to survive in the only way they knew. And though danger was always close, the bond between them grew stronger with every passing week. But the wild bunch was not built to hide forever. The railroad companies were waiting. The Pinkertons were planning, and the gang's next move would push them into the center of the most daring chapter of their lives. The calm before the storm was ending. The biggest test of the wild bunch was just around the corner. The quiet days in the hidden canyons could not last forever. The wild bunch had grown strong. Their confidence had grown even stronger, and Butch Cassidy knew that the time had come for something bigger, something that would show the entire West that his gang was not just another group of robbers. He wanted a job that would shake the railroads, a job that would prove the wild bunch was the most skilled outlaw team the frontier had ever seen, a job no one would forget. That job became the Wilcox train heist, one of the most daring robberies in American history. It started with a simple idea: strike the Union Pacific Overland Flyer No. 1, a train carrying large amounts of company money. It was fast, heavily guarded, and considered almost impossible to rob. But Butch didn't believe in impossible. He believed in preparation. For weeks he studied the route, He rode along the tracks at different hours, watching the train from far distances. He talked to local ranchers, pretending to be a harmless traveler. He learned which bridges were easiest to block, which hills offered the best hiding spots, and which valleys echoed the least dot. Then he chose the location, a lonely stretch of track near Wilcox, Wyoming. The land was open, but quiet, perfect for a surprise attack. The train would be moving slowly through that section in the early morning hours. That was exactly what Butch needed. Once the planning was complete, Butch gathered the men and explained the details. Sundance listened with his usual calm focus. Elsie Lay nodded along, asking smart questions. Ben Kilpatrick and Will Carver grinned with excitement. Kid Curry, however, was restless. He lived for moments like this, moments when danger felt close enough to touch. The gang spent the night before the heist in a narrow canyon, hidden from the world. The mood was tense, but steady. The fire flickered softly, casting shadows on the rock walls. Sundance cleaned his revolvers in silence. Butch checked his pocket watch again and again. Curry paced back and forth like a caged animal, unable to sit still. Elsie Lay finally broke the silence with a simple question. "You think tomorrow will go smooth?" Butch smiled faintly. "If we stick to the plan, it will." The night grew colder. The men lay down one by one, though few slept well. Everyone felt the weight of what was coming. A train robbery was always dangerous, but this one was different. This one could change everything for better or worse. Before dawn, they rode out. Their horses moved quietly through the dark, the sound of hooves muffled by soft dirt. A thin layer of fog hung over the land, giving their surroundings an eerie, ghost-like feel. It was the perfect cover. When they reached the tracks, the men took their positions. Sundance crouched near the rails, holding a lantern. Butch watched from a ridge above, studying every shadow. Curry lay hidden with his rifle, eyes sharp and alert. Minutes passed. Then a distant whistle cut through the fog. The train was coming. The overland flyer roared forward, its bright headlights slicing through the gray morning mist. As it approached the signal point, Sundance stepped onto the tracks and waved the lantern in a smooth, steady motion. The engineer spotted him and pulled the brake. The screech of metal filled the air as the train slowed, then finally stopped. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the wild bunch moved. Will Carver leaped onto the steps of the express car. Sundance followed him quickly. They forced the express messenger to open the first door, but the inner safe was locked tight. The gang expected this. They had dynamite ready. Meanwhile, Ben Kilpatrick and Elsie Lay secured the passengers and ensured no one tried anything foolish. Butch stayed outside, making sure the operation flowed the way he planned. Curry kept watch from the ridge, ready to shoot if any lawmen appeared in the distance. Inside the express car, Sundance and Will set the dynamite. They placed the sticks carefully around the safe. Butch had warned them to use only a small amount. A controlled explosion would open the safe without destroying the money. But in the dark, quiet tension of the early morning, Sundance misjudged the size of the charge. He used too much. When the fuse burned down, the explosion shook the entire train. The safe shattered, wooden boards splintered, and heavy metal pieces flew like deadly fragments. The blast was bigger than anyone expected. Even Carver fell backward, coughing in shock. But despite the chaos, the safe was open. The money was theirs. The gang rushed to gather the scattered bills and coins. Butch kept shouting for them to move quickly. They stuffed the bags, picked up the scattered silver, and ran toward their horses. The explosion had been heard for miles. They knew they had little time. As they mounted up, Butch gave a sharp shout, "Go." The wild bunch rode like lightning across the open plains, following Butch's pre-planned escape route. They switched horses at the first hidden corral, then again at the second. They dashed across rocky ground to erase their tracks. They crossed streams and used narrow paths that only they knew. Behind them, the overland flyer sat broken on the tracks, smoke rising from the blast. The engineer and passengers were shaken but alive. The Pinkertons would be summoned soon. Posses would form. The manhunt would begin. But for now, the wild bunch had done the impossible. They had robbed one of the most secure trains in America, and they had escaped. Their legend was growing. Their enemies were rising. The storm they had unleashed was only beginning. After the Wilcox train heist, the Wild Bunch became the most talked about outlaw gang in the entire West. Their names were printed in newspapers from Wyoming to Texas. Rewards rose to shocking amounts. And the Pinkerton agency now watched every road, every ranch, and every canyon. But something else was happening inside the gang, something powerful and dangerous. One member was beginning to stand out above the rest. A man whose name struck fear into every lawman who dared chase them. A man with a reputation so violent it shook towns to silence. His name was Kid Curry. Kid Curry. Born Harvey Logan, carried a lifetime of anger behind his eyes. His childhood was full of broken homes, family fights, and early loss. He learned young that the world was cruel, and he responded with strength. He could fight harder, shoot faster, and move quicker than most men. His anger was fuel, and sometimes it burned too bright in their hideouts. The other riders respected Curry, but they were careful around him. He wasn't like Butch, who joked easily and kept a soft smile. And he wasn't like Sundance, who stayed calm and quiet. Curry was fire. He burned hot, spoke fast, and reacted instantly. When most men hesitated, he didn't dot at first. Butch Cassidy hoped he could be a positive influence on Curry, convincing him to think before acting. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. One thing everyone knew, when trouble came, Curry was the man you wanted on your side. Weeks after the Wilcox robbery, the Wild Bunch laid low in a canyon hideout. They spent their days repairing saddles, brushing horses, and watching the horizon. Butch told the men to rest and stay alert. He knew the Pinkertons were coming. He just didn't know when. One morning, Curry spotted dust clouds in the distance. It was a posse 10 or 12 riders, moving fast. The air tightened. The gang grabbed their guns and saddles. They were always ready to run. But this time was different. The posse had followed their trail better than expected. As the gang mounted up, Curry's eyes burned with a fierce focus. "Let me handle them," he said. Butch shook his head. "We're not killing unless we have to." But Curry knew that sometimes have to came sooner than expected. The posse kept riding closer. Their shouts echoed through the canyon. Curry pushed his horse ahead, ignoring Butch's call to wait. He climbed a narrow ridge and positioned himself behind large rocks. His movements were smooth, practiced, almost sharp enough to cut through the wind. When the lawmen reached the canyon mouth, Curry fired the first shot. It was clean. It was fast. It was deadly. The posse scattered in panic. Horses stumbled. Riders ducked. The canyon filled with the echo of gunfire. Sundance joined Curry from another ridge, firing with calm precision. The two outlaws created a deadly crossfire that pinned the posse down. The lawmen finally retreated, dragging their wounded with them. The Wild Bunch escaped through a secret trail, just as Butch planned, but the damage was done. Curry had killed again. Word of the shootout spread rapidly. Newspapers painted Curry as a monster, calling him the West's most dangerous man. They exaggerated the numbers, but truth wasn't far behind. Curry was quickly blamed for more than 9 lawmen deaths. This attention changed everything. The Pinkertons shifted focus. Butch was still their top target, but Curry became their most feared enemy. Wanted posters showed his face with higher rewards. Sheriffs discussed him in worried voices, and ordinary people started locking their doors tighter whenever rumors of the Wild Bunch surfaced. Inside the gang, Curry's growing violence caused tension. Will Carver and Ben Kilpatrick respected him, but worried his decisions would draw endless danger. Elsie Lay often argued with Curry, telling him that violence would eventually get them all killed. Even Sundance, who rarely commented on anything, reminded Curry that every bullet attracted more lawmen. But Curry was who he was. He didn't apologize. He believed that fear protected the gang. He believed that striking hard kept enemies away. Sometimes he was right. Sometimes he WASN single quotes T'd out one night. While the gang camped in a narrow valley, Butch approached Curry privately. The fire crackled softly behind them. "But you can't keep killing every time someone chases us," Butch said. Curry looked at him with cold honesty. "They won't stop," he replied. "If we give them 1 inch, they'll take everything." Butch sighed. He knew Curry wasn't entirely wrong. The West was changing fast, and lawmen felt pressure to prove themselves. Every sheriff wanted to be the one who captured the Wild Bunch. Every deputy wanted fame. Every reporter wanted a dramatic story. Still, Butch feared what Curry's choices would lead to. Despite their differences, the two men shared something important: loyalty. No matter how they argued, they fought side by side when danger came. And when the gang needed someone to take the biggest risks, Curry was always first. Over time, his role in the Wild Bunch became clear. He was the enforcer, the storm that protected the gang when Butch's plans weren't enough. The legend of Kid Curry began to grow separate from the Wild Bunch. People told stories of his quick draw, his deadly accuracy, and his refusal to surrender. Some stories were true. Many were exaggerated, but all of them made him larger than life. And with every new tale, the Wild Bunch's popularity and danger continued to rise. But Butch Cassidy knew something that the others didn't want to admit. The more famous the Wild Bunch became, the shorter their time was running. Lawmen were coming, Pinkertons were watching, and the gang's next move would push them into a new level of danger. The storm around Kid Curry was only the beginning. After the violent clashes involving Kid Curry, the Wild Bunch's fame spread like wildfire across the West. Townspeople whispered their names in fear. Railroads demanded action. Newspapers printed stories so dramatic that ordinary citizens began to imagine the gang as unstoppable ghosts riding through the plains. But the Wild Bunch's success carried a heavy price, a price that soon arrived in the form of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, the most relentless force in America. The Pinkertons were not like ordinary sheriffs or local posses. They were professionals. They rode hard. They investigated deeper. They stayed on trails for months, and they never stopped hunting, no matter how far the outlaws ran. For the first time, the Wild Bunch faced enemies who matched their intelligence, discipline, and determination. The railroad companies sent letters demanding immediate results. The Pinkertons responded by assigning their best men to the case. Among them was Charlie Siringo, a hard-riding, sharp-minded detective known for his patience and skill. Siringo studied every bit of evidence: shoe prints, campfire ashes, abandoned horseshoes, witness stories, and old hideout rumors. He believed one thing strongly: to catch an outlaw, you must think like one, and he did. While the Wild Bunch rested in canyons and laughed around their fires, Siringo followed their trails silently. While Butch Cassidy planned their next move, the Pinkertons planned theirs. The game of hunter and hunted tightened with each passing week. One cold morning, the gang gathered in their hideout at Hollandewall, unaware that their enemies were closer than ever. Butch Cassidy paced near the fire, thinking through new ideas. Sundance Kid leaned against a rock, cleaning his rifle. Kid Curry watched the horizon from above, scanning for trouble. But this time, trouble was already moving their way. A small team of Pinkerton agents had tracked the gang to within a few miles. They couldn't see the hideout yet, but they knew they were close. They camped quietly, avoiding any noise that might alert the outlaws. Back at the hideout, Butch sensed something wasn't right. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't a sound or a sight, just a feeling that the world around them had shifted, as if danger was circling in the air. That evening, he gathered the men. "We need to be careful," he told them. "The law is getting closer. Smarter, more organized." Curry snorted. "Let them come." But Sundance shook his head. "They're different this time. They're not just chasing us. They're studying us." Butch agreed. The Pinkertons were watching their every move. They understood the gang's habits. They knew which hideouts the outlaws preferred. They even predicted escape routes. It was only a matter of time before something went wrong, and it did. One afternoon, a group of riders appeared on a distant ridge. The men inside the Wild Bunch camp froze. Sundance reached for his binoculars. Kid Curry grabbed his rifle instantly. Butch stayed calm, though his heart pounded in his chest. Sundance lowered the binoculars slowly. "Pinkertons," he said. "At least 8." The canyon filled with a heavy silence. For a moment, the gang felt the weight of reality. Their hideout, once a safe haven, had been breached. They could no longer rely on the old trails. They could no longer assume distance would keep them safe. The Pinkertons were evolving, and now the Wild Bunch had to evolve too. Butch acted quickly. He ordered the men to pack their supplies, saddle fresh horses, and prepare to move. The canyon that had sheltered them for months was no longer safe. They had to stay ahead of the law, even if it meant abandoning familiar territory. The gang rode out silently, keeping low and staying hidden between the canyon walls. As they escaped, the Pinkertons reached a hideout and studied the leftover campsites. They found ashes, boot prints, and marks left by horses. Siringo crouched beside the fire pit and studied the ground. They were here, he said, not long ago, even though the Pinkertons had missed them by only hours. The message was clear. The wild bunch was running out of places to hide. As the gang rode farther south, tension grew among them. Carver worried about their future. Ben Kilpatrick wondered if they should split up. Elsie Lay feared the Pinkertons would never stop, but Butch Cassidy refused to show fear. He encouraged the men, reminding them that they had outsmarted the law before. Still, even he knew this chase felt different. For days, the gang moved across rough terrain over rocky hills, across deep valleys, through narrow passes known only to experienced riders. They didn't sleep much. They didn't talk much. The pressure from behind pushed them harder than ever. Finally, after nearly a week of nonstop riding, they reached one of their southern hideouts. It wasn't as secure as Wall, but it gave them a moment to breathe. Butch gathered the men again. "We can't stay in one place for long," he said. "The Pinkertons will be back on us soon. We need to change how we work." This marked a turning point. The wild bunch, once relaxed and confident, had to adapt. They began splitting into smaller groups after each job, making it harder for lawmen to track them. They changed their routes, changed their signals, and even changed their habits. Butch pushed for less violence, hoping it would reduce pressure, but Curry shook his head every time. He believed the Pinkertons respected only strength. These differences slowly pulled at the gang from inside, like cracks forming in a wall. Loyalty remained, but fear and pressure grew. The Pinkertons continued their hunt, tracking hoofprints, interviewing witnesses, following every rumor. Siringo wrote in his journal, "They are clever, but they are human, and humans make mistakes." In the eyes of the Pinkertons, the wild bunch was not unbeatable. They were simply outlaws whose time would eventually run out. But the gang refused to go down quietly. They still had big dreams, big plans, and enough courage to keep fighting. Yet deep inside their hearts, each man felt the same cold truth. The wild bunch was entering a new era where survival would be harder than ever before. The hunt had officially begun, and there was no turning back. Pressure from the Pinkertons grew heavier with each passing month. The wild bunch could no longer stay in one place for long. Every campfire ash, every hoofprint, every rumor in a saloon could bring 100 riders to their trail. The gang had lived as ghosts for years, but now the ghosts were being hunted. But inside this growing storm, Butch Cassidy made a decision that shocked the entire gang. He was going to leave. This was not a dream that came overnight. Butch had talked about it many times before, about a faraway land where the grass was green, the weather warm, and the law had no idea who they were. A place where they could raise cattle, live quietly, and maybe build the peaceful future they had spoken about around lonely campfires. That place was South America. For a long time, Sundance Kid had listened to Butch's idea with quiet interest. He wasn't a man who believed in dreams easily, but the pressure in the United States had reached a dangerous level. Every robbery brought more posses. Every escape brought more pink. Even their trusted hideouts felt exposed. Then there was Etta Place, Sundance's companion. She was brave, loyal, and strong. She had lived long enough among outlaws to understand the risks. But she also believed that Sundance deserved something better than a life spent running from gun to gun. When Butch spoke about Argentina, Etta listened closely. A fresh start sounded like freedom. One night, as the gang rested in a quiet valley, Butch finally said the words out loud. "I'm heading south, to Argentina, to start over." The men looked at him in silence. Ben Kilpatrick frowned. "You're leaving the gang?" Butch nodded slowly. "We can't do this forever. The law is tightening. We need a way out," Curry scoffed. "You think you'll outrun the Pinkertons across an ocean?" Butch looked at him calmly. "Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. but at least I'll be moving toward something better. Sundance met Butch's eyes. "I'll go with you," he said quietly. At a place added, "And so will I." It was settled. The wild bunches, Core Butch and Sundance would try to escape the endless chase. The plan was simple: sell stolen horses, gather money, reach New York, board a steamship, and vanish. They traveled carefully, avoiding big towns and keeping a low profile. The Pinkertons were watching the west, not the east. This helped them slip through unnoticed. When they reached New York City, the noise and crowds overwhelmed them. None of them had seen anything like it. Buildings towered above the streets. Ships lined the harbor. People from every country moved through the city like tides. For the first time in their lives, Butch and Sundance realized something surprising. In a place filled with thousands of strangers, they were suddenly invisible. In February 1901, under false names, the three of them boarded a ship bound for Buenos Aires, Argentina, as the ship carried them farther from America. Butch stood on the deck, staring at the horizon. "Feels strange," he said. "Feels like a chance," Sundance replied. The journey took weeks. They crossed storms, calm waters, and freezing nights. But when they finally reached Argentina, the land looked wide and hopeful, like a fresh page, ready to be written on. The trio bought a small ranch in Calila, a peaceful region with open fields, clear rivers, and friendly neighbors. The people there had never heard of Butch Cassidy or the Sundance Kid. To them, the newcomers were simply hard-working Americans with an interest in cattle. For the first time in many years, Butch felt something unusual: peace. The days were slow and quiet. They woke with the sunrise. They cared for cattle. They planted small crops. They watched the hills turn golden under the afternoon sun. Sundance felt peace too. He wasn't a man of words, but even his quiet nature softened. Etta Place loved the ranch and quickly adapted to life in South America. She rode horses across the hills with Sundance, took care of the house, and smiled more than she ever had back home. Neighbors admired the couple. They were polite, reserved, and worked hard. Butch Cassidy became known locally as a cheerful rancher who always offered help. No one suspected he was one of the most wanted outlaws in American history. For a time, it seemed a dream had come true. But dreams, especially outlaw dreams, rarely last forever. One day, Butch noticed something that made his stomach tighten. A newspaper arrived from Buenos Aires with a familiar name printed inside: Pinkerton Agency. It reported that the detectives were searching South America for two American bandits, believed to be hiding in Argentina. Butch read the article again and again. The words felt like a shadow sliding across the ranch. "They're coming," he said. Sundance walked over slowly. "They don't know where we are yet, but they will," Butch replied. The Pinkertons were relentless. They had followed the gang across states, deserts, mountains, and now across oceans. Butch knew they would not stop until he and Sundance were either captured or dead. Despite the growing fear, the trio tried to hold on to their peaceful life. They continued running the ranch, hoping the Pinkertons would never find them. But the pressure increased every month. More reports appeared in newspapers. More rumors spread across Argentina about American outlaws buying land. Soon, Butch realized that starting over wasn't enough. They needed to stay ahead of the law. Again, one night, under a blanket of stars, Butch said quietly, "If they find us, we run, just like before." Sundance nodded. Etta looked between them with worry in her eyes. The dream was cracking. The walls were closing in. Life in South America had given them peace, but fate had not forgotten them. The world they tried to leave behind was catching up fast. A new chapter was coming, one filled with danger, uncertainty, and a final test of their loyalty. Life in South America had started as a dream for Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid, and Etta Place. Their ranch in Argentina gave them peace for the first time in years. The open fields, warm sunlight, and calm lifestyle made them feel almost normal. For a brief time, it seemed their outlaw past might stay behind them forever. But the Pinkertons had long memories. They sent letters, warnings, and agents across South America, spreading the word that two of America's most dangerous outlaws were living somewhere in the southern lands. Ranchers talked, bankers whispered, and slowly, Unwanted attention began gathering around the trio. One evening, a neighbor visited their ranch with a newspaper. He smiled politely, unaware of the fear his kindness carried. "Look at this," he said. "Two American bandits wanted by detectives. Seems the Old West still has stories." Butch read the article. It described two mysterious outlaws, believed to be hiding in Argentina. Their false names were not listed, but the details felt too close, too accurate. Sundance and Etta watched as Butch's expression darkened. "They're getting closer," Sundance muttered. Butch nodded. "We can't stay here much longer." Reluctantly, the trio sold their ranch. It hurt deeply. This ranch had been their one taste of a peaceful life. But staying meant death or capture. They had run before, and they would run again. Their next destination was Bolivia, a place where mining towns needed guards and payroll routes carried large amounts of cash. It was not as peaceful as Argentina, but it offered one thing they needed most: anonymity. Bolivia was rough, dusty, loud, and filled with desperate workers from around the world. In the chaos, Butch and Sundance blended in easily. They took honest jobs at first, guarding mining camps and transporting money. Their skill with guns made them respected quickly, though no one knew their true identities. Sundance sometimes joked, "We've gone from robbing payrolls to protecting them." Butch would grin. Life is full of surprises, yet old habits die hard. The peace did not last. One day, a mining manager insulted them, refusing to pay their promised wages. The anger simmered. The old outlaw life whispered in their ears. After a night of tense conversation, Butch said quietly, "We didn't come here to be cheated." A few days later, the mining company's payroll disappeared. No one could prove anything, but rumors traveled fast. Soon, whispers grew louder that two foreign cowboys were behind the robbery. Bolivia's lawmen were no Pinkertons, but they weren't blind either. By now, Etta felt the pressure. She loved Sundance deeply and cared for Butch like family, but the weight of constant running wore her down. She made a heartbreaking decision to return to the United States under a false name and start a quiet life away from danger. Sundance rode with her to the port, said goodbye, and watched her leave with tears in his usually calm eyes. After Ita's departure, Butch and Sundance drifted deeper into Bolivia. They robbed small banks and transport companies, sometimes out of need, sometimes out of habit. Their robberies were quick, clean, and careful, not like the violent outbursts of other bandits. Still, the consequences grew. Their faces appeared in local newspapers. Descriptions matched too closely. Rumors reached the Bolivian police that by late 1908, the two outlaws were running again, moving from town to town on rented mules. They arrived in the village of San Vicente, carrying the payroll of a local mining company they had stolen earlier that day. They planned to rest for the night, then disappear at sunrise. No one expected what happened next. The owner of the mule they had rented recognized something suspicious. The stolen mules had the mining company's brand on them. He alerted the local authorities. In minutes, Bolivian soldiers were riding toward San Vicente, guns ready. Butch and Sundance had taken shelter in a small adobe house at the edge of the village. They were tired, dusty, and unaware of how close danger had come. As darkness fell, Sundance looked out a small window and spotted movements porch light. "Rifles, silhouettes." "Butch," he whispered, "they're coming." The two men quietly prepared their guns. They had faced posses before, but this felt different. The house was small, the walls thin. Escape seemed impossible. They were trapped out within minutes. Bolivian soldiers surrounded the house. "Surrender?" Someone shouted. Butch gave a sad smile. "They sound serious." Sundance checked his revolver. "Then so are we." The first shots thundered through the night. The adobe walls shook with each bullet. Butch fired through the window, hitting a soldier who had moved too close. Sundance took the opposite side of the room, firing sharply, each shot precise. The gunfight lasted for hours. The village echoed with fear, shouts, and gunpowder. Torches flickered as the soldiers tightened the circle. Inside, the outlaws' ammunition dwindled. They knew the end was near. Between gunshots, Butch spoke softly. "You ever think we'd make it out of this life, old and gray?" Sundance gave a half smile. Not a chance. The soldiers paused for a moment, preparing for a final advance. Butch looked at Sundance. Sundance looked back. What happened next remains one of the West's greatest mysteries. Some say the soldiers stormed the house and killed both outlaws. Some say Butch, not wanting Sundance to suffer, ended his friend's life before the soldiers could reach them. Some even believe Butch escaped Bolivia and lived quietly under a new name, but the official Bolivian report claimed 2 foreign bandits were found dead inside the adobe house, one slumped near the window, the other near the back wall. No one could fully confirm their identities. The last stand of Butch, Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid became a legend, a story told in whispers, in books, and in films. A story of 2 men who rode together until the very last breath. For the Wild Bunch, this was the final chapter, the end of the last great outlaws of the American West, when news spread across Bolivia that 2 foreign bandits had died in a shootout in the village of San Vicente. The story quickly traveled far beyond the dusty mining towns of the Andes. It crossed borders, oceans, and languages. Newspapers in South America printed sketches of the men. Rumors filled the streets. People whispered that the mysterious Americans were none other than Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Yet no one truly knew. No one ever received clear proof, and no one ever found a way to silence the questions that followed. Back in the United States, the Pinkertons read the reports with cautious interest. They wanted confirmation, solid proof. The 2 outlaws they had chased across continents were finally gone. Letters were exchanged. Officials debated. Miners offered conflicting testimony. Some claimed the bodies were too damaged to recognize. Others swore they had been told by local witnesses that the 2 dead men were definitely the American bandits. But the truth stayed buried in mystery, even as the Pinkertons tried to close their files. The world refused to let the legend die. The Wild Bunch, once a tight band of outlaws riding through Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado, had now become part of Western myth. Their real lives blended with tall tales. Their names lived on in songs, campfire talks, and frontier stories handed down through generations. What kept the legend alive was not just the robberies or the shootouts. It was the humanity behind the guns. People remembered Butch Cassidy for his good humor, his intelligence, and his strange dislike for unnecessary killing. He wasn't a cruel outlaw. He was a man shaped by a world where survival demanded choices most people never had to make. They remembered Sundance Kid for his calmness, his quiet loyalty, and his unmatched skill with a revolver. He wasn't a loud man, but he was steady like a shadow that never left Butch's side. And they remembered Etta Pleista, mysterious woman who loved Sundance and stood by him through every danger, then slipped into history with grace, leaving more questions than answers. Then there was Kid Curry, the fiery heart of the Wild Bunch. His name echoed through towns long after he vanished, remembered as one of the most dangerous gunmen the West had produced. His rage, loyalty, and wild courage made him unforgettable. The rest of the gang, Ben, Kilpatrick, Will Carver, Elzie Laich, became threads woven into the tapestry of the Old West. Some died in gunfights, some were captured, some disappeared into the unknown, but each carried a piece of the Wild Bunch's spirit. The end of the Wild Bunch was also the end of an era. When Butch and Sundance left the United States, the frontier was already changing. Railroads connected the nation. Telegraph lines carried messages faster than horses. Towns grew, fences spread, and the wild plains shrank year by year. By the early 1900s, the world no longer had room for men like the Wild Bunch. They were reminders of a time when a man could vanish into wide lands, live under the open sky, and ride from one end of a territory to the other, with nothing but a horse and a dream. That time was fading, replaced by order, law, and the rising future. In many ways, the Wild Bunch didn't just fight lawmen. They fought time itself. They fought the slow death of the frontier. They fought the tightening grip of a changing America. They fought to keep a piece of freedom alive, even if it meant living on the edge of danger. Years passed after the Bolivian shootout, and still the stories kept coming. Some ranchers claimed Butch Cassidy visited them under a new name, older but alive. Some miners said Sundance escaped that night and traveled through South America like a drifting ghost. Some insisted the bodies buried in San Vicente were not the famous outlaws at all. Historians searched archives. Authors chased clues. Descendants came forward with letters, photos, and family stories. Yet no one ever unlocked the full truth. And maybe that is why the legend remains so powerful. The Wild Bunch left behind something no lawman could erase: mystery. Their story ended not with clear facts, but with unanswered questions. Did Butch survive and return to the United States? Did Sundance die in that Bolivian house, or ride away wounded into the night? Did the two friends meet their end together, side by side? Or did fate allow one of them to escape and live the quiet life they once dreamed of? The truth rests somewhere between history and imagination. What cannot be questioned, however, is the impact they left behind. The Wild Bunch became symbols of loyalty, courage, rebellion, and the human desire for freedom. Their robberies were daring. Their escapes were legendary. Their friendships were deep. And their final moment, whether in Bolivia or somewhere else, became one of the most iconic endings in Western history. Today, museums displayed their photographs, the famous Fort Worth picture, with their hats tilted and coats neatly buttoned. People stare at the faces, trying to imagine their lives, their thoughts, their dreams. Movies retell their adventures, songs honor their memory, and documentaries keep their story alive for new generations. But the real legacy of the Wild Bunch is simpler, quieter, and far more human. They were men searching for a place where they belong, men shaped by a rough world, men who lived boldly, rode fast, and refused to be forgotten. The Wild Bunch may have been criminals, but they were also the last riders of a dying West. When they disappeared, the frontier itself took its final breath. Their story ends with dust settling over empty plains, with hoofprints fading into the wind, and with legends whispering through time, carried from one storyteller to the next. Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid, Kid Curry, Elsie Lay, Ben Kilpatrick, Will Carver, they were more than outlaws. They were the final ghosts of the American frontier.